Hello, welcome to the Apex Energy Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Al-Qattan. My guest for this episode is Excellent Health, or he also goes by Hussein Jones. Hussein was a great guest to speak to, and we covered many interesting topics, but we mainly focused around this raw primal diet. The raw primal diet is a diet that consists of eating raw meat, yes, raw chicken and raw beef completely, while also drinking fermented milk. Now, this may strike many of you as being controversial or maybe even dangerous. However, with these types of subjects, I like to keep a mindset of being open-minded while also having a healthy amount of skepticism. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start the episode, and I hope you enjoy.
All right. Welcome, Jones, to the Apex Energy podcast. I'm glad to have you here. You mind just giving a brief introduction of yourself and your channel?
I have a channel called Excellent Health. I've been interested in health ever since I was 13, originally because of bodybuilding. Then I got into health at 15. Then I ran into problems because I was a vegan. And on the way there, I learned about a bunch of stuff and I saw that the things that I was struggling with, a bunch of other people were struggling with the same things. So when I brought those things up, people in my social circle, they got intrigued. So then I got the idea of starting a YouTube channel in high school to convey these ideas. And people, they were just as intrigued as the people in my social circle. And then, yeah, I just picked a bunch of topics that people struggle with. And I've made fairly long videos about those topics. So, hygiene alternatives, you've got salt, is salt healthy or is it not healthy? Sleep, what should you consider when it comes to sleep, bacteria, digestive health, the raw primal diet, nutrition in general, how you should view all the food groups. So every avenue of health I try to delve into. And that's what my channel is about. Everything that's related to health, I'm interested in.
Awesome. So, do you mind just giving me a brief kind of description of what were some of the issues you had and why did it lead you to go into the vegan diet? And then we can talk about the effects of the vegan diet.
I never really had an issue with the stuff I was doing when I was interested in bodybuilding, and this was 13 and 14. Then at 14, around 14, 15, because of vegan gains, and vegan gains, of course, he was lifting, he was pretty buff. He was making these nutrition videos talking about how veganism is the way to go for health, and that it will increase your testosterone, and that it's just good overall. He started making me think about health, and then I stumbled upon another guy, but I won't mention him for a few reasons. It was when I became vegan and started thinking about health, funnily enough, that I got health problems. And those health problems were, to keep it short, gut issues. Everything stemmed from the gut issues, really. I was eating a bunch of foods that create gas. So I had gas almost every day, when I was 15 and 16. And skin issues, a lot of skin issues, because those come from gut issues, of course. Vertigo, low blood sugar, I'd say improper development, pale skin in general, because of course I wasn't getting sun. I didn't think about it like that. I just thought that, oh, if you avoid animal foods, you'll be healthy. That was the extent of my thinking when it comes to health back then because of vegan gains. Again, he only talks about diet, he doesn't talk about anything else. So obviously, you shouldn't trust him. And then eczema. I mean, I had eczema when I was younger, but it's an extension of the same thing. You've got environmental pollution inside of all children nowadays. So, of course, and you're going to develop gut issues as a child, and you're going to get those problems. I was sensitive to it, so I got it. And then the veganism accentuated the eczema, so I started having sort of permanent eczema. I remember over here on the inside of my elbow, I had a big patch, a big red patch that didn't go away for several months, even during the summer, I believe. And usually, people in the summer, if they have eczema, that goes away. It's usually a winter problem because extra skin damage. But yeah, then I found Frank Tufano. He convinced me to start eating animal foods because mathematically speaking, they're more nutrient dense. I realized that there was a problem there. Went over to meat. That worked great. Acne reduced. Then, because I learned about how acne medicine works, it's synthetic vitamin A. Because Frank Teflon, fact that liver contains a bunch of vitamin A and it's natural acne medicine, I ate a bunch of liver in 1 month. Sorry, got rid of all the acne, and almost. Then a few months after that, I stumbled upon Agenus Wonder Planets, started eating raw animal foods, and I've just been eating raw meat, raw butter, raw fermented milk ever since then, trying to source these foods. Yeah, that's basically it. Then, of course, there are details between, in November 2019 when I started eating raw meat, and now there are a bunch of things I've done during that time. But still, that's the basic gist of it.
Okay, and what exactly were you eating on that vegan diet? Because I mean, it can mean a lot of different things, the vegan diet. So I'd like to know what foods do you think were causing specifically those issues with eczema and your skin issues?
I just think that a vegan diet in general, that's devoid of animal nutrition, does not work for human beings. So if you look at my vegan diet, it wasn't processed. It was a whole foods vegan diet. Like I was eating pretty high quality sourdough bread. I was eating pretty high quality organic peanut butter. I was eating rice, a bunch of vegetables, beans, legumes, all of these plant foods that supposedly are more nutrient dense than, I don't know, processed food in general, because processed vegan food is obviously not nutrient dense. I was eating whole foods. And because these foods aren't meant for human consumption, I'd say, especially if you have a weak gut, if you're an indigenous person who's been eating a specific preparation of some legume for many, many decades, then of course, or thousands of years even, there's not going to be a problem. But if you're eating legumes as a sick modern human being, of course, that's not going to work. And that's why when someone switches to, let's say, carnivore, they feel much better. But again, it was a whole foods vegan diet, and the problem was that these foods, they damage the gut lining, they're not easily digested, they're not easily broken down, and they're devoid of nutrients. They're devoid of B12, they're devoid of vitamin A, they're devoid of the density that you need. Like if you're eating 2000 calories, you need nutrient density to get a lot of nutrients. I wasn't getting
Mm,
that. Even if you're getting some nutrients, you need the nutrient density. Even if, let's say, some legume contains thiamine, vitamin B1, you're going to find far more thiamine in animal foods. And so, even though, let's say, you're getting both, you're getting far more thiamine when you're eating meat. And it's the same with all the other nutrients, really. It's the same with vitamin K2, it's the same with cholesterol, saturated fat. You're not getting any of that on a vegan diet. So, of course, all of those factors combined lead to disaster.
yeah, interesting. And what about vegetables? You've touched upon legumes. What about vegetables? Are they bad for us? Should we consume them? Should we include them in a primal diet?
I'd say vegetable juices are the only way of consuming vegetables in a good manner. And then it also has to do with the specific vegetable. There are certain vegetables that have a lot of anti-nutrients. There are other vegetables that are all right. So if you as a human being juice a carrot and you drink that, and then you juice, let's say, kale, and you drink the juice from that, just from the mouth, you realize that it's far better to consume a carrot than kale because the carrot tastes better and there's no bitterness to it. It doesn't have all of those anti-nutrients that you would find in kale. No
Mm,
oxalates, no this and that. The reason it's best to juice vegetables is because you're bypassing the cellulose. So humans can't break down cellulose. We have no enzymes that break down cellulose. We have bacteria that could eat up the cellulose, but that process is not very efficient at all. And I'd say that you have to eat a bunch of vegetables for a while to even get those bacteria to be at a place where they could start giving you a few more percentage points, so to speak. So when you juice a vegetable, you're bypassing all of the cellulose. You're just getting the cytoplasm, so to speak, and the stuff that's in the vacuole. If you look at the plant cell, that is, you're getting all of that, and you don't have to use any digestive resources to absorb that. You've got a bunch of minerals in the plant that you don't have to, you don't have to use any digestive power to get those minerals. And you're also getting a bunch of good structured water. You're getting hydration too. And so, yeah, juicing vegetables is a have to be smart about the way You're picking your vegetables. And of course, in modern society, pesticides are a problem. So always pick organic. And if you can grow your vegetables and you can control for the quality of the soil, you can feed the soil with a bunch of good stuff, mineral rich stuff like manure, as an example, then you're going to get something that is far better than, you know, any vegetable you'd find in the supermarket. So then juicing itself gives you a higher yield of health in total. So yeah, with cooking, I'll just tap into these details. Of course, if you're eating a raw vegetable, you've got cellulose in there. So the water is locked behind cellulose and you can't digest cellulose. So there's no reason to eat raw vegetables really. You're going to
Mm.
get a little bit, but not that much. And cooked vegetables, of course, you're breaking down the walls. You're going to get something. It's going to be easier to digest, but you've got nutrient loss. Like with vitamin C, it's very sensitive to heat. So if you cook it, of course, all the vitamin C that's in the vegetables, which is a hallmark of the vegetables and the fruits, nutrient-wise, that goes away. So yeah.
Interesting. I mean, just thinking about it, it kind of makes sense in a hunter-gatherer setting that it would be difficult to get all of those nutrients and those vitamins that we need just from veggies only. It would make sense that it would come from an animal, right, and from liver specifically, and or other organ meats. That would be much more nourishing as opposed to scavenging for all these different types of vegetables. So I can see how that would make sense as well. Okay, so why raw primal? Why raw meat as opposed to cooked meat?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There are a few things. The first one, I mean, the way we talked about the cooked vegetables and the raw vegetables, of course, bioavailability isn't really an issue with raw meat. So, you've got hydrochloric acid, you've got the necessary enzymes, most of the enzymes, I'd say, in the pancreatic fluid in the stomach and the intestinal wall are for breaking down protein, I'd say. So we don't have an issue with raw meat, just like any other animal that's a carnivore that includes meat in their diet doesn't have a problem with meat. We don't have a problem with meat. With the cooked vegetables, I said that you're breaking down the cells and you're, losing nutrients. The same thing happens when you cook meat. So you cook meat and whatever was in the tissue that once was a cow or an animal in general, you lose that. Like with B12 as an example, B12 is very heat sensitive. So if you cook meat, you're losing a bunch of the B12. Same thing with all the water soluble vitamins. Like if you think about it, a steak is filled with water. And of course, if these water soluble vitamins are water soluble, they're going to be found in the water component of the steak. So if you then cook the steak, what happens? You lose all of these water soluble vitamins. Not everything, of course, because you still got moisture in the steak after you cook it, but you lose a lot of it. And then from a hydration perspective, you're also cooking out all of that water. That's very good, structured, nice water bound to a bunch of nutrients. You want
Mm.
that. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want that. And then when you cook meat, you oxidize a bunch of the proteins, a bunch of the fats. You get lipid peroxides. So lipid peroxides is basically lipids, but you've oxidized them. And that's not a good thing. That's been scientifically proven to not be a good thing. It causes heart disease, it causes disease in general. And then the proteins, you get heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. You get cancerous substances. So when the red meat turns into, a brown surface, that's carcinogenic. And the more cooked it is, the more, crispy it is, the more carcinogenic it is. You also get advanced glycation end products and you get what are they called? Acrylamide. You get acrylamide. So, by the basis of all of these facts, and by the basis of us being able to handle raw meat in a very good manner, I don't see how cooked meat could be superior to raw meat. Yeah, yeah, that I guess that's it. You could say, and this is something that I said last time someone asked me this question, or not this question specifically. With cooked meat, from anecdotal evidence at least, what I'm seeing is that it's harder to digest. And yeah, this was the thing I was going to mention, but let's stick on this. If you eat cooked meat, you're going to get warmer. So in a cold setting, if you were to eat cooked meat, that would heat you up more. scientific evidence on this, nor on the fact that raw meat is easier to digest. But in general, I mean, we live in modern society, we live in houses. We don't have problems staying warm. We have modern clothing. There's not really a big issue there. What we need is food that is easy to digest because we don't have a lack of heat. We have a lack of digestive power. And what I'm seeing with all of these people who eat raw meat, I haven't ever stumbled upon someone who has eaten raw meat and told me that cooked meat digests in a better manner. No, everyone says that raw meat digests easier. And I believe this is because, you've got a organism that is designed to consume raw meat. Like if you look at any other animal, they're supposed to eat raw meat. It's the same with human beings. If you cook the meat and you give that to a lion, they're going to have digestive issues, of course, because you've radically changed the food that they usually eat in a certain state. It's the same thing with human beings. The way we break down meat, it's the same way lions break down meat. Of course, there are minute details, of course, but in general, all mammals, I'd say, that eat meat eat it raw, and human beings are no exception.
Okay, so why have all humans, it seems, throughout all cultures, cooked meat? And I don't know if you're aware, there's this theory of the reason why we developed larger forebrains as opposed to our other primate ancestors was through the invention, not the invention, but like the control of fire. And by cooking meats and by cooking meat, it made it easier to digest. And instead of diverting so much power into that digestion, it went towards developing our forebrains. That's like a widespread common theory. What's your objection to that, or how would you, I guess, combat that view? Because
Perfect.
that's the reason. Yeah.
A perfect question. Very good. Because someone needs to hear this if they're going to be convinced about this idea. When it comes to why people cook meat nowadays, it's the same reason as to why we put herbs on the meat. It's the same reason why we put salt and pepper and, why we like going to McDonald's and why we like eating tasty food in general. It's because if someone grows up eating cooked meat and they're used to that taste and they're used to it being salted and peppered, then of course, why would they eat raw meat? It's the same with the, let's say, Inuits. If they've grown up just eating raw meat, why would they cook their meat? So I'd say it's a cultural thing. Human beings in nature, I wouldn't say that they're able to distinguish. Some might do. Some might be able to distinguish between the health effects. But in general, when you're that healthy, cooked meat isn't that detrimental, I'd say. If you're a healthy human being, cooked meat isn't very detrimental. You might get a few problems in the long run, gout being one of them. But again, if you're a healthy human being, it won't affect you that much. In modern society, however, if you're eating cooked meat, that's going to be a problem because you don't have a lot of digestive power. So that's why again, people who switch to raw meat don't have an issue.
Hmm.
So again, in modern society, we see this the health effects far more easily than most cultures because when you're that healthy, you don't really notice these things because you're so resilient. Then when it comes to evolution, widespread use of fire has been a thing for 125,000 years. Human beings have been, looking like me and you do approximately for 200 to 300,000 years. By the nature of that fact, it tells you that for the majority of our existence, we've eaten raw meat. That's just the way it is. Fire was important, but that's because of survival. That's because it gave us heat. Um, it allowed us to um, use the heat to build stuff too. You need heat to do certain things, like making clay pots and this and that, and um, certain ways of making weapons. It becomes easier with fire. I don't know the details of that, but I've seen, on survival channels how they use
Yeah.
fire to make
Yeah.
certain tools. If you just look at cooked meat and raw meat and you look at the difference, and this, you know what? I'll go down this route instead. If we needed something to it is required for modern day human beings. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. So, therefore, if cooked meat was in some way special and it made us evolve, it would be required for modern day human beings. So, if for some reason cooked meat made us evolve, modern day human beings would need the specific thing that is created when you cook meat. They would need to eat that. But what we see is that if we take a human being and you put them on a raw meat diet, they have no problems. If you look at the
Mm.
Inuit, which have obviously their brains are just as big as ours, they're eating raw meat and they have no issue. So just by the nature of that fact, the statement that cooked meat made us evolve must be incorrect. Must be
Mm.
100% incorrect because it's not something that modern day human beings need. That's what I would say.
Okay. So, what would be your explanation behind why so many different cultures cook their meat, right? Across so many different geographic locations, across time, there always seems to be this idea of cooking meat. Although there are exceptions, in Middle Eastern cultures, we have kibba, which is like raw meat, or in some other cultures, they have raw meat varieties as well. Why do we see this convergence in behavior of all of these different cultures cooking meat? Is it maybe perhaps that it was a cultural or a behavior that was passed down through that cradle of civilization in Africa, perhaps? Or do you think they all these cultures came to that same conclusion or that same behavior independently? And if so, that would kind of mean then that there's some type of adaptation to that behavior if you were to go down that line. So which one do you go down?
I'll tell you this. Varus Ahmad has a book called The Disease of Kings. And the basic gist of it is he looks at how the history of Asia um, aligns with nutrition. So the people in northern Asia, they're eating raw meat and they're drinking raw milk and they have a primarily, a heavy animal foods diet. While the civilizations in the south, who are more, let's say, civilized, they're eating, the basic Arab cuisine. They're eating, rice, grains,
Mm-hmm.
salt and pepper and spices, and the food needs to be very tasty and refined.
Mm-hmm.
And the art of the culinary art is very important in society, as opposed to, fueling men becoming warriors. And what you see is that the people in the northern part of Asia, they conquer those in the southern part of Asia who have become weak through eating this food, and then they become like that. The southern people, they adopt the culture that they have in the southern parts of Asia, and they become weak, and then another tribe in the north then comes and conquers them.
Wow.
So that should tell you a lot about how nutrition affects us. What I'd say is, again, it's cultural. If you have a society that has cooked cuisine, then of course you're going to eat cooked meat. Like cooking in general is the base of the culinary arts. So of course you're going to want to cook meat. And so if you have a society that's cooking a lot of food groups, of course they're going to have a higher probability of cooking animal foods, is what I'd say. When you have a society that's very peaceful, that doesn't have any problems, they're going to want to delve into the culinary stuff, and so they're going to have a higher tendency of cooking. But when you have people who, are warriors, who are living like nomads, they're going to cook less. They're going to eat a lot of it raw because they just want to fuel themselves. They want to, you know, train and create more soldiers. That's their goal
Mm.
really. So that's what I'd say. It's 100% cultural because again, if you look at
Mm.
modern day Ethiopia, raw meat is a very normal thing for them. If you look at Korea or Japan, and in Korea they eat raw squid. If you look at Japan, they eat a bunch of stuff raw, even raw chicken. It's
Yeah.
primarily cultural. Then, when you introduce people who study nutrition, that's when you can start answering these questions because these societies, let's say, eating Northern Asian people and the Southern people, they didn't have carbohydrates and fat and protein and B vitamins and vitamin K2 and vitamin D3 in their minds. We have that. They didn't think about it that way. They don't know about heterocyclic amines. They don't know about acrylamide. They have no idea about these things. So it takes someone in modern society who's looking at it from a nutrition perspective to understand whether raw meat or cooked meat is superior. And again, historically speaking, if we look at Asia, it seems as though one of them is the winner.
Very interesting. Okay. And where did that source come from? That source of information? You said it came from a book.
Varis Ahmad, my good friend Varis Ahmad, he's written a book
Okay.
about the subject.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out. That sounds very interesting. And then just one more thing I want to touch upon this is what about the idea that pathogens are within meat? Like, let's say you have not a fresh piece of meat, but a meat that is a couple days old and it hasn't been refrigerated, and you have all this bacteria pathogens on it, and that if you cook it, you would kill off most of those things and significantly decrease the chance that you would get some deadly illness. What I mean, we could kind of branch that out into salmonella with chickens too, right? So isn't that a potential advantage of cooking as opposed to just eating it raw?
Well, that's the interesting thing. I mean, if you go to any raw meat eating tribe, they wouldn't be eating raw meat, nor would they thrive as a culture if raw meat was dangerous. So you've got this dish called kiviak that the Inuit make. They take a seal skin and then they bury raw birds. Like they haven't removed the feathers or anything. They just put the bird corpses into the seal skin. They bury that underground and then they let that ferment for several months. So we're not talking
Hmm.
about 2 days in the fridge, 3 days in the fridge, and it's a little bit stinky. We're talking several months. They dig that out, and they don't cook it. They eat it like that. They remove the feathers from the big juice of corpses, raw bird corpses, and they eat the
Wow.
meat. And yeah, whatever parasites or bacteria are in there are obviously not making them sick. So I'd say that bacteria are not responsible for their environment. If you have a clean environment and if the bacteria are feeding on something that is natural, that is healthy, you won't have a problem. However, if the bacteria are feeding on something unnatural, something that's, let's say, dead, something that's toxic, you're going to have a different outcome. So, and this is something that's very interesting, I'd say. There's this very interesting post by a woman called Sandrine Perez, I believe, where she takes a bunch of different raw milk jars. You've got ultra high uh, treated milk, you've got pasteurized whole milk, you've got, all of these types of milk, and then you've got raw milk. She leaves all of these jars out in room temperature for 3 weeks. And when she comes back, she finds that the raw milk, it has no mold. It has no, green or blue or dark
Hmm.
patches. Nothing. Nothing has happened to the raw milk. All the other ones, they're molded.
Hmm.
When you ferment or let cooked food stay out for more than it should, you get something poisonous because the bacteria are feeding on something that is dead, that doesn't have its own bacterial environment. It it becomes toxic. The byproduct of them feeding on the cooked dead thing is toxic. So I've seen accounts of people eating a old steak that's cooked and they die. They die. But with raw meat, if you ferment raw meat, you don't get the same problem. If you ferment raw animal foods, you don't get the same problem because that thing has its own bacterial environment. And that's, I mean, it's hard to convince someone who hasn't eaten these foods, but those bacteria in high quality raw animal foods are always safe. And the reason I know this is because in Ethiopia, they're not getting sick. The Inuit are not getting sick. The Nenets are not getting sick. All the people who follow this kind of diet where they eat rotten meat, some people do that almost every day, raw meat in general, including raw chicken, raw fish, anything of that sort, raw butter, raw milk, Some people have done that for many, many years without ever getting sick. So it's all about sourcing your food correctly. Of course, if you've got a chicken that's been injected with antibiotics and has lived in a way where even if you were to consume it raw, it's totally unhealthy to consume. Of course, if bacteria feed on that tissue, you're going to get problems. And again, the bacteria has also been influenced by antibiotics. And when bacteria is influenced by antibiotics, you might get different issues. You see how that works?
Hmm.
So with high quality raw animal products, this is something I always say. With high quality raw animal products, they don't cause bacterial food poisoning in human beings at all. And in the cases where someone might eat, let's say, some raw animal food and they got sick, it's always pollution. It's always down to pollution. Pollution is what made the person sick, not the bacteria. Just because the bacteria is there doesn't mean that the pollution made them sick. And if you look at the symptoms of bacterial food poisoning and then poisoning from pollution, it's almost identical.
Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, I'm gonna have to look more into this. This is like one of those big paradigm shifts that's gonna take me a while to kind of get through. But I'm curious to know, like, yeah, like has everything we've been told just been completely incorrect, or have we misunderstood? And I want to get your thoughts on that. Okay, I can understand logically how we have this capability of eating raw meat, but I'd like to know your comments on the culture. We seem to be so vehemently opposed to raw meat, just by way of people reacting to even some of your videos. And this idea that salmon raw chicken will kill you because you're going to get salmonella. So where do you think that comes from? Is it intentional? Is it just like misinformation that people are just not aware of these things? What do you think it is?
It probably came from Louis Pasteur. Pasteur came up with the germ theory, which says that disease originates from the germ. And because of that, we got pasteurization. He said that the thing that's causing disease in, let's say, these humans is the fact that they're not heating their meat, their milk. And from that, because he said that, raw milk became vilified. And so the
Hmm.
pasteurization industry said, we can earn, I'm sorry, I swallowed there. Um, the pasteurization industry said we can earn a lot of money here. So, of course, that became a thing. For the majority of our existence, and even if you go back, 1,000 years, we've been drinking raw milk. And there's, no accounts of any group of people, any civilization saying that raw milk is causing disease. Like, go back to the 1700s, 1800s, 1600s, 1500s. Do you have any accounts of people drinking raw milk or talking about raw milk making anyone sick? No. Raw milk was banned during the 70s, and a lot of other stuff, politically speaking, happened during the 70s. So, yeah, that period was, I wouldn't trust the people in power from that point until now. That's what I'm going to say. If you look at just as an example, because I know me and you are Arabs, the Bedouin Arabs, they still drink raw camel milk. Are they getting sick? No.
Yep.
The Maasai have been drinking raw milk and raw blood for the majority of their existence. Do they have any problems? Have they ever gotten any problems? No, not at all. Again, it's the same with, the fact that people say that fat causes heart disease. That came in the 60s and then it started to become very popular during the 70s. Back in the 20s and 30s, when you look at cookbooks, the main thing, at least in the US, was the inclusion of eggs, cream, and butter. A bunch of high fat animal foods. There was no heart disease back then. No heart disease at all.
Hmm.
That was not a medical
Hmm.
problem at that point. And they were eating a bunch of fat. So if that fact is, completely ridiculous, or that statement that fat causes heart disease, if that's that ridiculous, then many other things are ridiculous, like high quality raw animal foods cause disease. I mean, if you look at many cultures, you look at Ethiopia, let's look at Europe, France and Germany.
Hmm.
cuisine. Especially, if you go 100 years back now, modernized people don't really like raw meat because it's vilified. You've got the government telling them that steak tartare can make you sick. Back then, there was no such thing. They used to eat, sorry, they used to eat a bunch of steak tartare, and they had no problems. Some people still do. Met production is still a thing in Germany where they take raw pork. So again, trichinosis, but who cares about trichinosis? They put that on bread and they eat it. A bunch of Germans still
Hmm.
do. Do they get trichinosis and die? No. A bunch of people in Germany are eating that and they get no problems. So this entire thing is just as overblown as fat causes heart disease. That's what I would say. Put it on the same level as that, and then you'll realize how ridiculous it is.
Wow. Okay. And let's transition. I'd love to ask you, what does your current diet look like? What kind of things are you eating?
Basically, it's it's the raw primal diet Biogenes Wonderplan. It's restricted by my food access. So, of course, if I had infinite food access, I would maybe pick other things. But what I have access to right now is what I'm eating. It's the basic gist of it is raw fermented milk, raw ground beef, raw butter, those are the main animal foods. If I could eat eggs, I would eat eggs, but I have an egg intolerance that I got from veganism. I also consume celery juice, carrot juice, beet juice, a combination of those three. But the base of it is celery juice. Very good for hydration. Very good for me specifically. It has been very good for me at least. Again, a recommendation from Hogenus Wonderplants. The main vegetable in his vegetable juices was celery juice. And then do we have anything else? Sometimes I eat dates. Sometimes I eat oranges. Sometimes I eat tomatoes. I sometimes eat fruit here and there. And sometimes, very rarely, but like once every few months, I eat cooked starch. I should do it more often, maybe, but right now I don't really crave it. I only eat it when I crave it.
Hmm.
But it does help gain weight. And what I mean by cooked starch is you take potatoes or rice. With rice, it's a little bit more complicated, but with potatoes, you boil them, then you remove the skin. You wait for them to not be too hot, and then you mix in raw butter with that. No salt, no spices, no nothing. I mix that, and then I eat that by itself. So with no meat, no vegetable juice, no this and that. Just dairy can be eaten with it, but nothing else really. I sometimes do that. That's the basic gist of my diet, I'd say. Sometimes I eat raw chicken. Oh, and recently I've been eating oysters here and there. Oysters, good for
Yeah.
iodine, good for DHA.
DHA, yeah.
So I include oysters. Sometimes if I find good fish like cod, I include that. But tuna and the other um, deep water fishes, they're uh, they're very
Yeah.
expensive, so I try to avoid them. Yeah, that's basically it, really.
Okay. So it's different than like let's say an animal-based Saladino diet where he's just eating meat, liver, and fruits and honey. You're
Definitely.
kind of you're adding in other things as well. You're not against vegetables, right? You're still consuming it in the form of juice, like you said, because it breaks down that cellulose. Okay, interesting. So what would you say against like Paul Saladino, let's say, where he says, "Oh, vegetables are bad for you because of defense chemicals and the high amount of oxalates."
That's I'd say this, and this is, I'd say the most important thing to realize about nutrition in general. All foods, or most foods, I'd say, have positive and negative aspects. For certain people, the positive aspects outweigh the negative aspects. So I won't say that there aren't substances in celery which might not be optimal. But what I'm saying is that the net effect that I get is worth it and that I can deal with the negatives fairly easily. Someone else might not be able to, but I can, and many people do. I mean, if you look at many people who drink celery juice, they say that they've improved their digestive health, they have more energy, their skin cleared up. Clearly, there's something positive going on. And, I don't dismisses all of this when he sees this anecdotal evidence. But my advice would be, if you're very against vegetables for some reason, if you're Paul, but let's say dogmatic, realize that there must be some positive aspect that is affecting these human beings who are experimenting on themselves with celery juice. So again, all foods have positive and negative aspects. Tomato has it, dates has also have it, and if you intelligently use vegetables and vegetable juice as medicine, I don't see a problem with it.
Okay. And it seems like this guy sounds a little bit hard to pronounce his name. Jonas von der Planets. Is that how you
Correct.
say it?
Yeah, Audience
Okay,
Wonder Planets.
von der Planets. So is he your main guy, your main inspiration, let's say, in terms of health and nutrition?
I'd say when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to most things, uh, I'll say this: when it comes to nutrition and when it comes to pollution avoidance, I've never found any health practitioner in history who's as accurate as him. He's the best. I haven't seen anyone's nutrition protocol replicate the results that his diet gets in human beings. And I
Mm,
thought about why this was. And what I realized was that if you organically sit there with a pen and paper and you try to look at the principles of nutrition, what guides the nutrition of human beings, he got it down to a T. He didn't necessarily talk about nutrition principles openly. He didn't call them nutrition principles, but he mentioned them a lot. He mentioned cooked byproducts. He mentioned nutrient degradation. He mentioned bioavailability. He mentioned, nutrients, that you need nutrients. He mentioned digestive stress. He mentioned all of these things, really. And because his diet is the absolute best at maximizing all of those things, when we look at the food axis of modern day human beings, if we integrate those two, his nutrition principles with the axis of modern day human beings, like um, what I mean by that, just on a side note, is not all indigenous tribes, let's say, have access to chicken eggs. But in modern society, we have far more access to chicken eggs and dairy and beef than many, many groups of people in history. So when you take what we have access to, the best of what we have access to, and you consume it in the best manner possible, and you have a system for how to do that, you're going to get the results that he gets in people. Was there something else you asked?
no, no, I just wanted to know more about his story. What is it about him that inspires you? I know you told me that his method is very effective. But yeah, I'd just like to dig in more about his story. How did he come about his diet?
I'd say, it was a long time ago when I listened to his workshop, so I'm not 100% sure about his story. But what I'll tell you is this: the way anyone should approach this is through experimentation. So you can't know if what Argenis Wonderplants is saying is good or bad if you haven't tried it. And I didn't necessarily believe everything he was saying. I said, okay, this he is talking very positively about it, and there's an opportunity for me to discover if he's correct or not. But in my mind, of course, I was saying that I've probably stumbled upon something very good because I didn't believe that he was lying, and he wasn't. So when I tried the stuff that he preaches, I got amazing results. The results that he was talking about in his workshops with his clients. And so that's when I understood that everything he's talking about is correct. And when I tried anything that he talks about, it was correct. So that's why I say that Diogenes Wonderplants is the greatest health practitioner of all time in terms of nutrition. He is that because, again, not only did I try his stuff, anyone who tries his stuff gets the same results. Anyone. I haven't seen a person on this diet who didn't do well. No one. And the things very intense protocol, the very strict protocol, the very advanced protocol that you need to really get to really fix the negative effects of what modern society has subjected you to. I don't see any other diet, any other protocol doing that. Nutritionally, at least. Then, of course, there are other things to do outside of nutrition.
Okay. And I kind of wanted to circle back. I'm really curious to ask you how did you develop that egg intolerance? How did veganism cause that?
I think this is a bit controversial in this community, but I believe I'm not going to say that I'm 100% sure, but there is this basic cycle of leaky gut causing intolerances. And the way that works is you got specific, let's say, proteins in the egg. You eat the egg, that goes into your intestine, and then it passes through the intestinal lining. Now it's in the blood. Your immune system, let's say, it doesn't just deal with the stuff that's in there in the blood. It needs to get rid of the undigested food particles, right? It doesn't just deal with these undigested food particles. It remembers their structure. It remembers them. So then, if for some reason you now consume the same thing that was terrorizing your red blood cells, your body is going to start the reaction at the mouth. However, there's another aspect to this. When I ate that egg, the reaction started before the egg reached my small intestine. It started in the mouth,
Hmm.
which leaves me very confused. So I'd say that this system that causes intolerances and allergies, a lot of it is pollution. But in my case, I have no idea what it is. No idea, honestly speaking. It might be bacteria. It might be pollution. Who knows? It's something, and I still have it, and I can't figure out what it is. But I believe that exposure to eggs might fix it.
Okay, so how do you plan on doing that? You said slowly expose yourself to eggs.
Yeah. So what I've been doing is I wash my hair with eggs because not just because I have an egg intolerance, but because I found that it's a great shampoo. It really removes all the grease. It leaves your hair shiny. It's very very good for the hair. I've never found anything better. To be more specific, egg yolks because the white sucks out the fat a lot. So if you have, let's say, short hair or um, hair that's prone to frizziness, um, if you include the egg white, you might have problems. So stick to the egg yolks if you're going to try this. In the beginning,
Okay,
when I
so
tried it, my scalp got really itchy. Nowadays, my scalp isn't getting itchy. So at
hmm,
least when it comes to the scalp, I've sort of, stabilized there. But then, after doing this, where I stabilized my scalp, I tried eggs, but I still get the reaction. So what I think I'd have to do is I'd have to, consume an egg and then deal with the reaction like several times, which would be very painful until I can eat them.
hmm,
But yeah, I don't really want to do that. But maybe I'll do
okay,
it someday.
okay. And so let's kind of go in there in that direction of shampoo. Do you use shampoo in general, like normal shampoo, or is it just like purely animal based in that domain as well?
No, no. I mean, when it comes to, I mentioned pollution avoidance earlier. If you wouldn't eat shampoo, if you wouldn't take a shampoo bottle and squeeze that stuff into your mouth and then, you swallow that down to your stomach, if you wouldn't do that, then don't put it on your skin. Don't breathe that in. It's the same with perfume, with deodorant, with all of these modern products. They're all filled with carcinogens, with endocrine disruptors, with respiratory disruptors. They're filled with all of these toxins, and this is a common thing. Many organizations that care about public health sit there and talk about this. That there are a bunch of unregulated ingredients in perfume that cause cancer, that have been clinically proven to cause cancer. So I avoid all of that. Of course, I wouldn't use a normal shampoo. I use alternatives for almost everything. So yeah, it's animal based. It's plant based. Although those two because they usually refer to nutrition. But anyway, everything is natural because otherwise you're getting pollution into you and that will set you back.
Okay. And what about toothpaste?
Toothpaste, um, for me, I've noticed that I don't need any toothpaste, but you can make natural toothpaste. I'm not opposed to that. What I do is I just use a toothbrush and I just water it down. I just use water. That's it. And then I oil pull sometimes here and there. Like the optimal amount is like 2 to 3 times a week, but usually it's like as of late I haven't done it in a while. So yeah, oil pulling and just brushing. I've found that brushing is the most important thing for gum health and dental health, and that the toothpaste doesn't really do that much.
Okay, interesting. How does your breath smell, or how do people like comment? I mean, I don't. That's kind of a personal question, but I mean, and the person will naturally think you're not using toothpaste. Your breath must smell
Yeah, I
bad with
know.
all those foods that you're eating. Yeah.
People think about it in that way, but just like there are things that we use to freshen up our breath, there are natural things to use to freshen up your breath. Mostly
Mm,
speaking, if I just brush my teeth and I rinse my mouth with water, like I rinse my mouth with water after every meal, that's usually enough to not
mm,
have stinky breath. And I've checked this. I've checked this with my parents. Like, okay, does it smell now? Okay, it doesn't smell. Does
yeah.
it smell now? It doesn't smell. What has caused in the past, what caused bad smell, regardless of what I did, was calculus, not just plaque, but tooth stone. You know, the stuff that doesn't come out, the yellow stuff that doesn't come out. That causes a bad smell. But as long as you remove it, there's no issue. Then, like alternatives to things that make your breath smell good, if brushing your teeth isn't enough because you ate, rotten chicken or something, you can chew on a piece of ginger. You can, rinse your mouth with ginger juice mixed with something. You can eat an orange. You can eat or put a piece of lemon in your mouth. You can chew
Mm,
celery, chew a carrot, and then spit that out. All of those things will clean your teeth. So that's my
mm.
recommendation if you want your breath to smell good.
Okay. And you said something back there. Oil pills?
Oil
Did you say
pulling.
oil pulling? What is that?
That is when you take oil and like coconut oil or butter or beef fat, and you put that in your mouth and you don't swallow it. You keep it in
Mm,
your mouth. You swish it around for like 10 to 15 minutes, and that sucks up a bunch of stuff from your gums and your teeth, and it cleans you out. And then you spit that out because now you probably don't want to swallow that after it has been in your mouth for 15 minutes, clearing up all of the stuff that shouldn't be there. And there's this girl that made a post, I believe. I think it was Veronica. She said that she used to have holes in her teeth, and she did oil pulling and she removed all of them. She healed all of them. So yeah, oil pulling
wow,
seems to work.
that's amazing. Okay. You know, I just kind of want to make a brief comment, and then I want to keep asking you these questions. It seems like this new wave of health can only really happen through the internet, it seems, or the internet is like accelerating it at such a large pace. Just an example is what you just told me, as well as all these anecdotes from people, right? These subreddits of people where they talk about health and their results, or just these online communities. It provides a very quick way of communicating this information and knowing the results of certain things without needing centralized academia, without needing to be a professor. So, would you agree with that? I just kind of a thought I came up with.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the reason why these people like me and you exist, I guess, is because we've ran into problems. And fortunately, me and you didn't go to the doctor. I believe, at least I didn't go to the doctor for the
Yeah,
issues I had. But many people um, um, previous to us, let's say, they did go to the doctor and their issues didn't go away. So they got desperate and they started doing the woo woo things, the hippie stuff.
yeah, yeah.
And that other people about it. And then people who, let's say, have the same issues as them, they try it before going to the doctor, and so they get converted into, the health stuff. Same with Augenus Wonderplants. That's what happened to him. He went to the doctor, went to the doctor, went to the doctor, got messed up, messed up, messed up. Then he started listening to the alternative guys, and he also, worked it out by himself, and he got better. So me and you listen to him, and what happens? It's like, having a conversation with some guy that we met, but it's on YouTube. Like the human brain can differentiate between this sound that's coming out of this device. Like we think when we listen to people on the internet, we visualize that as an actual person talking to us, but in reality, it's just a device. So because humans have this amazing imagination, we're able to get affected by people that upload things to the internet. And because, people talk about these things on the internet, we stumble upon them and we start doing stuff. And what Jack Kruse calls this is decentralized medicine. That's exactly what it is. It's decentralized medicine. And what I'd say is our results are far better than what centralized medicine is giving you. And again, when these things happen, like the virus, let's say, when those things happen, the distrust increases, so to speak. You get myocarditis and this and that, cases, people dying from the shot, and people start distrusting the centralized medical establishment. So then they go to the alternative guys and they see we look much healthier than the doctors, and they start listening to us because what alternative do you have? And then again, some people go to the vegan side, some people go to the fruitarian side, some people go to the paleo side, some people go to the Saladino side, and very few people go to the Augenist side. And so it's just up to the people who have a clear view of all of these domains to guide the people who are coming into the decentralized medicine space. But yes, you're 100% correct. The more sickness we've got in society, the more people are going to be interested in conversations like this.
Okay. I'd love to continue asking you about your diet and what you think about certain metabolic states, including like ketosis, for example. Do you um, switch between being in ketosis or just like only eating fats and the meat, and then do you go into eating like other carbohydrates as well? So, what are your thoughts on, I guess, just the metabolic state of ketosis in general?
I made a video called "Do Humans Need Carbohydrates?" and I had to think about this a lot. Ketosis, like that's a big subject, but I'd say that ultimately your genes matter. Like if you have Inuit genes, if you're from Greenland, you should probably not eat dates. If you ever travel to, let's say, Iraq, and they give you dates, you should probably not consume that. You should probably not go to that country because you're not designed for it. You'd probably be more healthy living where you already are. They are adapted toward eating a bunch of fat. They're very good at handling themselves in that state. While other people, let's say the Peruvian Indians, the Andean people, they eat a bunch of starch. They've been doing that for thousands of years. You should probably not put them in ketosis. They're very good at handling carbohydrates. They've got adaptations for that. And then again, if you're Andean and you live in modern society, I mean, the experiment is pretty simple. If you go into, ketosis and you feel good, sure, continue on that path. If you get problems within a year, sure, you know, don't do that. If you feel better on carbs, then eat carbs. With carbohydrates, experimentation is the most important thing. Then another thing that surprisingly I heard from Bart K is that human beings aren't supposed to be in ketosis all the time. That even if you're not eating carbohydrates, if you're just eating protein and fat, like let's say once a day, you get out of ketosis. You're not going to be in ketosis anymore because you're going to start producing glucose, I believe. You're going to get gluconeogenesis from the protein and the fat to some
Yeah.
degree. And so
Mhm.
even if you're zero carb, you're going to get out of ketosis. Constantly being in ketosis is not a good thing because you're going to increase your cortisol. You're going to be stressed out. And something else that I got from Varys Ahmad and something that I see with many women is that, and this is something he talks about, of course, women have a tendency to do very for some specific reason. They're more suited toward eating carbohydrates. And I guess a reason as to why that is because when you combine fat and carbs, it's easier to gain weight. And they need to maintain more adipose tissue as opposed to a man. We have more muscle, less adipose tissue. They have more adipose tissue, less lean muscle mass. So therefore, we would do better, some of us, with zero carb, while they would do worse. So for women, I would never recommend zero carb because it seems as though any woman who goes, on a zero carb diet gets a bunch of issues. Then, if the other thing is if you're trying to gain weight, zero carb is a bad idea, a very bad idea, because if you restrict one macronutrient, you're not going to get the Randall cycle, and the Randall cycle is your absolute best friend when you want to gain weight, because what it does is one macronutrient goes toward building tissue and the other one goes toward energy. Your body picks one of them and the other one goes toward building fat. And if you're skinny, you want fat. So, of course, you want to activate the Randall cycle. And you can't activate the Randall cycle and build fat, gain weight without combining fat and carbohydrates. And so, if you're going zero carb, you're not getting any glucose. See how that works? So if you're very
Mm,
fat, let's say you're very fat and you want to lose weight. And of course, restricting carbohydrates is a good idea because you've got all of these resources that you can burn up. Like it doesn't matter if you need to do, let's say, gluconeogenesis. Yeah, it might stress out your liver because you do gluconeogenesis in your liver. But still, you've got all of this fat in general, so you have the storage, you can do whatever you
mhm,
want with it, really. So if you
mm,
restrict one macronutrient and it's becoming harder to get a certain thing because you're not eating it, well, that doesn't apply to your case, because the things that a skinny person would need to get from their diet, the fat person gets from their fat. So again, and if you want to lose weight, of course, you don't want the Randall cycle. You don't want to get any insulin. So I'd say that with carbohydrates, on average, people do best with low carb, because if you aren't adapted to absolute zero carb, then you're getting enough carbohydrates so that you don't need to do too much gluconeogenesis. Again, the main point is how adapted are you to doing a bunch of gluconeogenesis? Again, how much have you adapted to carbohydrates based on your ancestry? And again, the easiest way to figure this out is by experimenting. So again, the my recommendation, again, low carb. That's usually what I do. I consume, I'd say, between 50 and 70 grams of carbs every day. But again, I don't count anything, so that's just an estimate.
okay. And I would love to ask, come to a close with this question. What are your thoughts on nutrition, diet, and mixing it into spirituality? I don't know if you're a spiritual person, but I'm really interested in this intersection between health and just like general health and spiritual health, let's say. Do you believe there's a connection? What are your thoughts on that?
I'd say there is, but it's not in the way where if you were to talk to a vegan woman who does yoga, she would connect them on a more hooey wooey level, if you know what I mean. I will
Hmm.
connect it in a more masculine way. If and you'll realize what that entails. It's going to be very organized. So when I talk about spirituality, and the way I've come to see things is that anything that is dependent on the mind is not going to get you closer to the truth of reality. It's not in the mind. It's what allows the mind, it's what's prior to the mind that you could call spiritual. And again, I like to call spirituality realism because that's what it is. You're digging into your experience and trying to dissect what reality is. And what we see across cultures who are very interested in this is that concentration, mindfulness, very advanced states, brain states, are important to cultivate. You need to practice the mind a lot to be able to know the mind for what it is, so to speak. And that's just a little part of it, really, in the grand scheme of things. The better your nutrition is, your brain is going to work. I should say, because the brain is the organ, the mind is what we call the function of the brain. That's specifically in human beings. So the way nutrition intersects spirituality or realism is the more you're able to optimize your brain, the easier it is going to be to get a powerful mind so that you can see the nature of reality. It's not necessary, let's say, to see the nature of reality with, by it's not necessary to have good nutrition to see the nature of reality. There are a bunch of, Indian yogis and Tibetan Buddhists who have done that with vegan diets to some degree. Not the Tibetans, I'd say, because they don't have access to that stuff. They eat animal foods because of their environment. But from a nutrition perspective, if someone came to me and said, I want to, really get a powerful mind so that I can understand what I am and what reality is, I'd say, okay, well, we'll completely optimize your health then, if that's your goal. Because the better your brain works, the easier that's going to be. So, yeah, if you optimize the brain, which is what allows you to experience reality, it allows you to interpret everything that's in front of you, really. Um, you're able to do the spiritual stuff better. That's what I would say.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much, Jones, for coming on. And do you have any remarks you would like to leave to the audience before we end this podcast?
One thing that I always like to say is that whenever you do something that's good for you, for your health, you're doing something good for society. So every time you don't do the unhealthy thing and you do the healthy thing, you're doing something great for the world. If we look at the health of the world, it's composed of each action that each individual takes, especially in modern society. Again, we wouldn't have this problem unless modern society creates health problems. So every single action that someone performs, I'd say, is meaningful. And if anything, I wouldn't say that this should necessarily motivate someone, but I would say that I'm deeply thankful for everybody who cares about health, because you're doing something great for the world, especially in this world where the people in modern society are sick and they don't know, they're in a hole and they don't know how to get out of it.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and let's do another episode then.
Sure.